Just a moment. I think we need just a brief break after this extraordinary, wonderful introduction, contextualization we received. There's going to be now quite a difference, but I think, maybe a keynote speech really should be always something of an outlier, something, different. So it will be that. I'm just waiting for the slides, the presentation to say. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Thank you to the conference convener and organizer, to Mr. Isanka P. Gamage, and Professor Anita Singh, main pillar, I now gather, of this organization, for the invitation to be a part of this 8th International Future of Women's Conference. And in a way, imagine yourself to be seeing others beside me, because ideally there should be my longtime research partner standing beside me, and beyond that, the communities of women with whom we have worked over the time. But as has been noted, we live in a complicated world, and mobility and cross-border mobility is not always to be taken for granted. So I speak on behalf of extraordinary community of Hui Muslim women in central China. I had a brief glance at this extraordinary program, presentations to be expected, and that tells me how much we can look forward to, but also how much work has been invested in organizing such an event. So I really want to, at the beginning, thank each and everyone who's been contributed in different roles, different functions, to bring this conference to this point, making this conference such, I'm sure, a success. And of course, the name Mahisha occurs to me, who's been really quite extraordinary in her work, her efficiency, and the volunteers who are, helping to make this conference a success. This conference theme, regrounding feminism theory and praxis, has resonated greatly with the speaker, a ethnographer who has made it her research focus to study marginalized feminism. That is, I need someone quickly to repair that before I continue. Who's made this her particular focus to study marginalized feminisms in historical and contemporary Chinese society. But the conference theme resonates also in different respects. I try not to drop. Thank you very much. For this feminist ethnographer, some of the most challenging, transformative experiences have come through the praxis of fieldwork and the study of women marginalized in dual ways as member of an ethno-religious minority, Hui Muslim women in central China in particular, and as women. Nor did their role in the history of China's organized Islam receive much scholarly attention. I could say before 2000, none at all. And this applies both to Chinese language scholarship, Hui scholarship, as it does to Western studies of Islam in China. So the research into this vastly neglected phenomenon of female imam-led women's mosque proved exciting, proved productive. But research undertaken jointly with a local Hainanese Muslim Hui sociologist, Shui, proved equally importantly revelatory. And this development towards what became collaborative, dialogic research methodology, making the site of discovery of new knowledge, the ongoing conversation between the two principal researchers, insider and outsider in relation to Muslim community, but also between researchers and the wider community of women, proved as crucial, as important as actual sites of fieldwork. This particular collaborative methodology, perhaps initially surprisingly, attracted its critics, whether, in my case, remarks from Western colleagues as to the waste of time engaging in collaborative work, all that entailed, or in raised eyebrows on the part of Chinese colleagues, questioning my research partner's motives. Difficulties later on also extended into publishing co-authored work. So when eventually the journal Feminist Theory accepted our first article on collaborative feminist methodology, it was somewhat, awkwardly hailed an innovative piece. The German sinologist Mechthild Leutner amended her history of interaction between Chinese and German anthropologists from colonial, covering the period from colonial to neoliberal relations, with a new paradigm, the somewhat awkwardly called, what she called, minority emancipatory paradigm, our work as exemplary reciprocal. But to start at the beginning, my first sighting of Qingzhen Nusi, or women's mosque in the central province of China, that led to my meeting with a local Hui sociologist, was brought about by a somewhat exasperated female imam, a new Ahong. Eager to save her time, she was busy after all, by seeing two researchers who knew nothing of each other on separate occasions, asking questions she considered to be very similar. And she asked for the two of us to meet. I was, of course, delighted. I, at that time, was in Henan for different reasons and knew nothing of the presence of a Chinese colleague doing or starting with her particular fieldwork. So I hoped for collaboration. I asked for a possible collaboration. She said no. When the agreement came after lengthy, mutually enlightening conversations, this newly forged partnership proved transformative. And both our outsider-insider status shifted. On my part, a re-examining of what Isabel Gunning called arrogant perceptions, instead allowing critical self-reflexivity to deepen into awareness and knowledge of the other circumstances, one's own impact on the other circumstances, conditions. On Shui's part, my local partner's part, she could permit herself a critical distance from over-familiarity with her environment, allow herself questioning of me and my feminism. Moreover, it allowed me slowly, tentatively, to enter the circle of women communities around my research partner, with our relationship, which was considered to be one of trust and mutual trust, the key, that relationship, the key to trust extended to me by both women's mosque leaders, female imam, Ni Ahong, and their mosque congregations. Indeed, eventually leading to all their active participation in a collectively enacted ethnography about being a feminist in other places. Briefly, the structure of what, sorry, yeah, still. Decolonization of knowledge production is an ongoing process, and it made its relational nature for prominent focus of our conversations, our research, refined, reframed during years of work. And it reinforced a feminist epistemology born of interactive dialogic processes of knowledge. In my decades of fieldwork and research, initially in South and then subsequently for a longer period of time in central China, that's the provinces of Henan, Shanxi, Hebei, Shandong, the shift into collaborative and dialogic research partnership has not only become the mainstay of our methodology, but its impact, the impact on this, of this methodology on discovery of knowledge and scope and depth of knowledge production has been pronounced. The expanding scope and depth of that sociality, which became a requisite for our fieldwork, changed the nature of research that brought conversations among researchers and research communities into search for key investigative questions, instigating consultations over limitations, access to resources, over points of views, over leadership, over the readership, audiences, over purpose, and purpose of our work, sensitivity and relevance. It led us to follow on our earlier historical research on female imam-led women's mosques, which we studied in China during a period of relative openness, their origin, geographical distribution, leadership, institutional evolution, with a research focus on what we were witnessing among our fellow researchers, a resurgence of piety, collective validation. And this became then the final, this became the theme then of our final book in a trilogy on gender and Islam in China. Our growing community of researchers whose involvement and interest in our research, whose openness when it came to tell their lives negotiated between the demands of faith and, so sorry. Negotiated between the demands of faith and the pressures from a rapidly modernizing society. This openness was as unexpected as it was revelatory and inspired us, the two researchers and our research partners, to make these women's memories, their reminiscences, their fragments, remembered fragments of personal, familiar, and collective memories, the stuff of recorded history. Together, we engage in an ambitious project of recovery, a project of recovery that could only have been accomplished with a collaboration involving an ever-expanding number of women's mosque community and their transformation in the course of years of research from interlocutors to co-researchers and, more lately, authors of their own history. It became, as one female imam, Nu Ahong, put it, it became a movement, research transforming into a movement, awakening to their past, to their contribution to the development of Islam in China. And they hoped to the history of a multicultural and diversely constituted nation. I apologize for handling this rather awkwardly. This very briefly, before proceeding to introduce it to the community of our researchers, is what I referred to earlier on, in that mutual exploration before my partner and I decided to form a collaboration. What we investigated both in that mutual exploration was really what Isabel Gunning covered in her three-pronged methodology, the cultural travel needed to explore other situated feminism, clear about boundaries, ramifications of one's own will, interests, understanding one's own historical context, understanding how as an outsider one impacts on others' world, perceived by the other, and recognizing the complexities of life circumstances of the other woman. I see the other woman, her world, sense of self through her eyes. Very briefly, this is a illustration. I could give a 1-hour lecture on exactly this point. My researcher in that green shirt, on the occasion of the beginning of fieldwork in Kaifeng in Henan, and the need to, in order to gain permission for our fieldwork, to be sensitive to the kind of pressures, strictures surrounding my partners, my research partners, flexibility. So here are, together, joined up representatives of academic circle, the Islamic Association of city authorities, party, the Communist Party representatives, etc., all to be placated, not wined, but dined, given this is a halal restaurant, in order to reassure that indeed we could be trusted, that work could proceed then. Coming back to the community, the conversations that widened, as I said, beyond the two researchers, the communities we studied. Here we have Ahong, Du Ahong, one of the most extraordinarily learned, influential female imams who are able to show her picture, passed away a great many years ago, a source of extraordinary support to us, to our work. Female imams in China, a profession that has existed for over 300 years, and in the course of time developed a kind of professionalization from learned women offering private classes to Muslim women, rudimentaries of the faith, to a situation where in the last 150 to 100 years, China now, central China has independent women's mosques in charge of properly ordained Ahong, such as Du Ahong. And it's quite clear how long this goes back. This is a photograph, an archival photograph of a family of 8 generations of Ahong. So 8 generations of women in that family who had been in charge of rural mosques. Here, the mosques, some of you may already have been in that part of China, a rural mosque on the left. On the right-hand side, perhaps the most prominent women's mosque in Kaifang, or in Da Hutong, women's mosque, which continues to play an extraordinarily important role in terms of training of young women for a profession of Ahong, in terms of the kind of general services provided for the community, women's community in Kaifang, but in terms of the worship, the prayers led by Ahong, the counseling and other services such mosques provide. Here a little bit of an impression of what's called both the bustle and the serenity that you can find in these women's mosques here. The many years of research involved research allowed us to find an ever-growing body of Jingge. Jingge, Islamic chants, oral tradition of women's mosques. A tradition that had, we estimate, been perhaps in existence for 200 or more years, yet quite unknown to the younger generation of Muslim women. Ignorant of their significance, the significance of these chants to not only the pedagogical tradition of women's mosques, but also to their part in sustaining collective identity. Do consider in these parts Muslim women were illiterate not only in own language, in Chinese, but of course also Arabic and Persian. Persian, the language of the women's Quran, that was and is still being taught in these women's mosques, despite the fact we are talking about Sunni Islam. The large number of enthusiastic co-researchers allowed for storytelling, allowed the travel into remote corners of provinces where women were identified who remembered childhood, spent learning through chanting under the guidance of a beloved imam, making for time recalling the pious ways of previous generations of women in their family, as well as the constraints under which women performed their primary roles as mothers, as wives, often in tension with their desire to perform prescribed duties of prayer at their mosque. It allowed for recording of the most moving performances when emotion, piety, and empathy of chanters with words and with the listening audience created an extraordinary atmosphere, a moving atmosphere in front of a mesmerized audience of family and neighbors. In turn, then, we were able to record lengthy conversations, questions that made everyone conscious of the significance of these chants, of thus a collective initiative to women's claims to spiritual equality and legitimacy so long denied to these women. In the course of search for women who remembered, in the process of recording chants recalled when they appeared obliterated by the continued forces of state-steered political repression and Islamic patriarchy. In the collective act of listening and associating, in the act of transcribing recorded chants, and difficult interpretations in long, drawn-out workshop sessions to understand meaning of Persian, Arabic, and Chinese language chants of old, many never written down. All of us changed. We heard through these chants extraordinary contents of these chants of hardship suffered during years of persecution, repression of religious practice. But there were also uplifting narratives of courage, of resilience, of leadership, remembering the joy of communal celebrations in women-only mosques. As the 74-year-old Dan Tai recalled, after musing over childhood spent in the local women's mosque, learning the words of a new chant taught by a beloved Ahong, she said, chanting Jinge is good, makes you remember where you come from, unquote. What was so extraordinary to the two researchers was the commitment by all women to bring an oral tradition that had been neglected, that had been seen as associative with ignorance, illiteracy, backwardness, before communism brought enlightenment and liberation to women. That willingness to put in the work to bring this tradition into the archive of women's history, a commitment which came with a realization we were putting on record local women's history of belief, the making of a lasting record of their own history, the printing of hundreds of copies for use in women's mosques, a first ever compilation of women's mosque chants. All these outputs provided a catalyst for new unprecedented impulses to continue with research. That is, these women continuing their research long after our project as such, this project came to an end. Here, briefly, the kind of enormity of involvement on the part of local mosque congregations, women's congregation, and the number of women involved in this work. Here, as the banner suggests, a research meeting, preparatory meeting for women, for Muslim women to strategize, to think about how these neglected chants that no one really seemed to know could be salvaged, could be recorded, could be brought to life. And here, just very briefly, because of limitations of time, such a recording, one of the earliest first women who was slowly remembering what she was taught in childhood, a kuhua, a lament on the transitoriness of life. Are you able to, can you, the volunteers are not there? I had hoped. Those who were listening to tears for the younger generation had never heard chants on love and loss and forgiveness. I'm so sorry to have to tell that. Here at work, recording in a particular, one of the more important women's mosques, as we were making our way around the various central provinces. The writing down, the copying, remember, nothing had ever been recorded, transliterated from Persian, classical Chinese, and the extraordinary sessions of women, particularly of learned Ahung, coming together to understand, to consult, to agree on meaning. Here, some of the documents gathered, the writings, the use of apps like WhatsApp, WeChat, communicate with each other. So what sprung up, as Nuhang Ahung remarked, I cited her earlier on, a movement. What had been a research project, one person, two researchers, extended into these mosque communities to become quite an extraordinary immersive movement. Then the book, the first ever compilation that we edited. And I stop with a brief remark on the outcomes. Conversations brought to light, conversations, the work, the research, brought to light women's presence and the resilience of Islamic faith in central China. It brought to light, in other words, the value of women to their faith, to the wider Muslim community, to Chinese civilization, they hope, to wider contexts, where hitherto they had been barely visible, of peripheral importance. You might argue in terms of percentage, Muslim population making up maybe 2% of the entire Chinese population. Nevertheless, the total number of over 30, close to actually 30 million Muslims, particularly the most populous ethnicity, Hui Muslims, to be found across China, made their presence a significant presence across the vastness of China. For us, the researchers, the resurgence we were so intensely aware of, the resurgence of piety, intensified by collective discovery of the richness of women's expressive tradition, a tradition that had been ruptured with communist insistence on the downgrading, diminishing of religious life. All this made a persuasive case for China's Muslim history to be evaluated for its unique female gendered contribution and to become, one might even argue, an integral part, constituting an integral part of what's called made in China feminisms. Maybe just a brief footnote, the kind of work we were able to do, the openness, despite, as I was saying, the need to get permissions through sometimes quite difficult and lengthy protocols, that openness at that time allowed us to visit mosques, to engage with female leaders, to make these recordings, to be able to have the support from these extraordinary women. That openness, unfortunately, is no longer the case, and it is thus that my partner would not be able here to stand at my side. When a paradigm shift, you might say, has been taken place from 自治 to 天下, from self-rule, encouragement of self-rule, multiculturalism, to greater cohesion of Chinese people under heaven, the heaven ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. But these women, particularly from older generations, have passed through many political changes, and they know that records of time besieged may need concealment, but this neither compromises their value nor ultimately the relevance for future time. And I'm often told by these women, nothing is certain in life on earth, nothing to be taken for granted, but this never diminishes their hope that children, grandchildren's lives may continue to see progress, hope, and betterment, and that concealed transcripts, because what we have compiled in terms of a record of songs is not yet properly published. It is in print to serve as teaching materials in women's mosques. But they hope that one day these may become accessible when times have changed. And the gladness generally felt that these records are in place when there is the time for activation of their power. Here, this compilation, the books that we put together, and in the age of I thought I might as well provide a hard copy of that, but as I said, as I was saying, it is not yet possible to bring that into the light of publication. A book just come out that now brings together, the history of our work together, our research, our conversations, and our chants. I think I won't play. This was just a final chant of lament, but instead come to the conclusion now. And in conclusion, I would like to return to the significance of knowledge thus accumulated, brought, recovered into life, thus on record. Kate Icahn, in reflecting what she calls the political efficacy of being in time differently, that is being temporarily dispersed across different times, different generations, draws our attention to what she calls the archival turn, the safeguarding of accumulated stored knowledge in contemporary feminism, and how much it means. Having implications for the shoring up of a younger generation's legacy and the honoring of elders, as it has for the imagining and for the working, quote, of building possible worlds in the present and for the future. It is how sites of accumulated knowledge, the treasure trove of our learning, are deployed in the presence that renders them active sites of inspiration, that it is a responsibility on the researchers, she says, to ensure that the records of our work are activated by the present and in the presence and for the future. Icahn concludes, at stake then are not the worlds these collections claim to represent, but rather the worlds they invite us to imagine and even realize. In the language of the conveners of the conference, these are worlds, sorry, I'm just finding, because I don't want to misquote. which in what of convenience affords an equitable future for all women. And here I'm paraphrasing. I'm unable to find for a moment the last page. Yeah. But what I'm suggesting that it is not just the responsibility, the researcher to activate records, and bring these to life. But that responsibility must be shared, as it should be, and no longer be the prerogative of a researcher. And I want to conclude with the words of this Ahong, one of the most active participants in our movement for recovery of women's history of faith, which transformed research into collective and a gentle movement of pride and self-affirmation. And this is what she said in conclusion. The process of editing this book, the book just now, the compilation of chants, was also a process of self-improvement, of self-discovery. The songbook is an outcome of huge effort made by many people. We are bound together by such a project, inspired by its themes. Women Ahong have become a cohesive, responsible team through working on this project. We have gained a more insightful understanding of our traditional culture, and therefore feel pride in representing Muslim women's culture in central China. As a new era as Women Ahong, we hope to be in step with global development, with a new outlook, continuing our past bold strides to assert ourselves with unique and bold voices. That to me seemed to me an extraordinary and transformative outcome of that work. As I indicated, this right now, politically speaking, is not the moment where women Ahong, female imams, where women of belief, marginalized because of their ethno-religious identity, can put forward their voices. But the records are there, the importance of their, ready to be activated once more when the time is right. Thank you very much. And apology for all the hiccups here. Thank you.